Part 2. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 11. It was getting dark when she came out of the bathroom after taking a shower. All she needed to do now was to let go of everything, take a walk around the second-class cabin, and then go back to have a good sleep. Betty met her at the door of the entertainment card room, which was very lively. "Sella, are you okay with your cold?" "No." Her rosy complexion really didn't look like she was sick. "I heard that you waltzed with the Duke yesterday." Betty took her arm. "He was also playing cards inside, so go say hello." "No fighting, sleep." Sierra wanted to break away, but just as her legs took a step back, her back bumped into two small hands pushing towards her. Following Betty's strength, she was pushed directly into the card room by being squeezed forward and backward. A four-person card table is placed every 4 or 5 meters in the spacious room. The aroma of mixed cigarette smoke is strong. Several female stars who play openly with the men frequently attract the eyes of the noble ladies around them. Inside, there is a scarlet-colored wool carpet spread by the window. 4 men and a female family member are sitting at the card table. The Duke in a black suit is on the left side of the printed wall. He took off his black gloves and held an athlete's cigarette between his pale fingers with several rings. His dark eyes were half-lidded, watching the shuffling process in the center indifferently. They just finished an inning. Playing cards with him, isn't this a clear violation? As soon as Sierra finished thinking subconsciously, she felt bad again. After Betty pulled her in, she went to a card table by herself. The 2 girls who pushed her were the 2 girls she rolled her eyes at last night. Now they had pushed her forcefully to the card table where Rose Hill was. "Dad, Lily, and I are here to play for a while." The red-haired girl bent down and greeted the middle-aged man at the card table cordially. The girl named Lily held Sierra's hand tightly, bowed and saluted the man who was sitting there, who was very eye-catching, Duke. Sierra was forced to squat down and salute, her brown eyes raised to look at him. Beautiful and vivid girly colors, gorgeous like oil paintings on the wall. Empty and quiet, his mind-reading skills failed again. The burning ashes of the cigarette fell into the cylinder. Rose Hill rotated his fingers and pressed it out. "Come and sit, Sierra." Lily's expression was stiff, and Sierra's expression was also stiff. "She wants to go back to sleep, she wants to go back to sleep, she wants to go back to sleep." The sound returned to his ears again, and Rose Hill picked up the martini and put it in front of her. "Are you sleepy?" Sierra, who had just sat down next to him, pursed her lips and shook her head. "I'm not sleepy, I can stay with you for a while." If those bad women hadn't dragged her here, she would have gone to bed by now. Her duplicity made Rose Hill raise her eyebrows, and turn to glance at the 2 girls sitting across from each other to watch the cards together. "They brought you here." He tilted his head, his expression cold. The breath in her ears was cool, and the whisper that only belonged to 2 people made Sierra blush inexplicably. She asked him in a low voice, "Did you see it?" He didn't answer, and a new round of card games began. The interaction between the 2 almost made Lily angry to death. Her eyes were burning, and she talked to her partner who was watching the cards diagonally across the street. "Dad has bought a new large villa in the capital and is renovating it. He is waiting for me to come and play next summer." "How many acres of land did you buy? Can you hunt and play baseball?" The red-haired girl became interested. "Definitely. Dad bought it specifically for my pleasure." The middle-aged nobleman at the card table was very happy with his daughter's praise. Lily's eyes swept over the Duke intentionally or unintentionally, and the girl dozing next to him holding a wine glass. She didn't listen to a word of the conversation that was overtly and covertly sarcastic about Sierra being a poor person. She only complained in her heart that the other person looked like 2 peacocks spreading their tails in search of mating. She lowered her head and took a sip of the wine given by Rose Hill. A spiciness rushed straight to her forehead. She suddenly woke up. She coughed hard and silently complained in her heart, "It's so spicy. Has his mouth lost its sense of taste?" 5 times, Rosehill paid attention to the girl next to her 3 times. Her strange thoughts came on and off, and it was difficult for him to pull his thoughts out of her head. Sierra put down her wine glass and stood up and said, "I'm going to lie down in the bathroom." She was going to rinse her mouth out and never drink this crap again next time. Rosehill paused playing cards and looked up at her. The girl's dark brown hair was simply tied up, her neck was exposed, and her blue arteries were beating rhythmically in front of his eyes. Rosehill rolled her throat and suddenly discovered that the smell of her wine was very unique. The rich sweet aroma is mixed with the taste of martini, like Damascus pink rose. Spicy and sweet. The bottomless black eyes reflected a strange dark red color under the illumination of the warm lamp. Sierra looked back at him inadvertently, her man-eating eyes like those of a secluded beast made her hair stand on end. She hurried into the bathroom, and all she could think about was the tragic sight of being sucked into a mummy. This damn death setting is doomed, her blood is a nice little dessert for him. Betty at the other card table caught Lily's eyes, and the 3 of them stood up and followed Sierra to the bathroom. Betty was guarding the door to stop the ladies who wanted to come in to use the bathroom. There were only 3 of them in the spacious bathroom. As soon as Sierra walked to the sink to wash her face and refresh herself, she heard the sound of the outer door being locked. She looked through the mirror at the 2 people standing behind her. "You still want to go to the bathroom with me? Sella, don't be so shameless and try to seduce the Duke." Lily looked gloomy. Sierra took out a tissue and wiped her hands, turned around and said, "Didn't you force me to look at the cards? Are you angry now?" "He's mine." Lily stepped forward and held her arm tightly. Her slender nails dug into her flesh through the material of her clothes, and an unforeseen punch hit her belly. Sierra arched her back in pain, broke away from Lily's hand with her backhand, grabbed her neck under her shocked gaze, turned around and knocked her face hard on the sink. The sound of the bridge of the nose breaking when it hit the countertop was clear and crisp. As soon as the girl's scream came out, Sierra grabbed her and covered her mouth. She stared fiercely at the red-haired girl who wanted to come forward to help. "Girls can't be violent." After speaking, Sierra pushed Lily on top of her, and the 2 people wearing heavy skirts staggered and fell to the ground. Exception today. It just so happened that the frightened people in the past few days needed to vent their emotions. Sierra did not stop there. She savagely pounced on the 2 girls who fell together and punched them several times in the abdomen. Hearing the whining and commotion inside, Betty opened the door and came in, realizing something was wrong. She was shocked by the scene in front of her. "Sella, how dare you hit the Marquis's daughter? Didn't you acquiesce? You turned your elbow and went to someone else's house." Sierra raised her eyes, her beautiful face full of fierceness. She is not a little girl who was raised proudly by the nobles. She is an abandoned baby who is about to freeze to death on the streets of London. She is a wild child who was adopted by a welfare institution and relied on her fists to avoid being bullied until she grew up. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 12. What is she best at? Deception and violence. You're done. Betty took a step back, fear in her eyes. "Ah!" Sierra sneered and climbed up from the 2 girls. She turned to look at herself in the mirror and raised her hand to mess up her simple and elegant hairstyle. The tears in her eyes quickly gathered and formed in a few movements. "What do men hate the most? I see very pitiful women. What's more, she is such a stunning girl with a charming face." Having seen too many intrigues between girls, Betty instantly understood what she was going to do. By the time she was about to stop him, it was already too late. Sierra's strength was like a black bull's brute force that knocked her away. She rushed out of the toilet with disheveled hair and red eyes. She paused slightly in the card room and looked at the man at the back table with blurred eyes. Rosehill had just lit a new cigarette, his face expressionless, as if he had expected it. The girl with messy brown hair had crystal tears dripping from the corner of her jaw. Seeing that he had no intention of getting up to help, she bit her lip and turned around and ran away without saying a word. A few seconds after she left, Rosehill took a puff of smoke in a natural movement and then pressed the whole newly lit cigarette into the ashtray. The men playing cards at the same table were not aware of what happened next. When Betty and the red-haired girl brought Lily out to find the doctor, everyone realized that something was wrong. Looking at Rosehill again, he didn't even say hello, he just put his hands in his pockets and left the card room. Sierra ran to the second-class deck in one breath before stopping, leaning on the railing with her palms and looking into the distance. The sea was calm tonight, and no one was walking on the cold deck. Wiping away the tears that were squeezed out of her face, Sierra raised her eyes to look at the star-studded night sky, admiring the night view. Rosehill's mind-reading ability definitely knew in advance the bad intentions of the two girls towards her, and she was not surprised that he would not come forward to help. And the few seconds she paused there were enough for the women in the card room to create the latest gossip. Tomorrow's latest headline: the daughter of a marquis was jealous of love and violently beat the poor daughter of an earl who was still in mourning. There were only 2 coal movers left working in the boiler room of the royal cruise ship. When the bottom hull baffle was hit by a force, the 2 people who were moving coal were so frightened that they sat on the ground. That tiny impact was like scratching an itch for the Big Mac cruise ship, and did not bring any strange effects to the people on board. The mermaid Luoxid who was trapped in the cargo hold seemed to be telepathic. His eyes were dark, his long tail swayed rhythmically in the water, and a series of low and mysterious languages came out of his mouth. The deep-sea mermaid swirling around the cruise ship emerged from the water, looked toward the cargo hold at the stern of the ship, and reluctantly allowed it to sail toward the land little by little. A black suit with a faint smell of tobacco was draped over the dazed Sierra. "What's on your mind?" Calm and indifferent questions sounded around him. Sierra tilted her head, and he happened to look over. His perfect face, which looked like an ant all day long, showed an inquiring emotion towards her for the first time. Rosehill's arrival was unexpected. She thought he wouldn't come. It looked like he really didn't know what she was thinking at the moment. She remembered that Rosehill's mind-reading ability was completely ineffective against Anna 11. Could it be that it was good and bad for her? Could it be that she and Anna 11 have the same father and mother, and she also inherited some special characteristics? Sierra hugged her coat tightly and said shamelessly, "I miss you." The cold nobleman lowered his head and said something shocking to the world, "Consider working for me." Sierra glared, "Recruiting as a subordinate without getting married? You know that I am the daughter of an earl after all, right? Work for you." Rosehill calmly expressed her embarrassment, "Work for me and you can get the status and wealth you want." No one dares to bully her, which sounds like a good idea. Sierra asked tentatively, "What job?" "The Duke's personal secretary. This is the first and most popular occupation for newly independent women these days." He glanced at her delicate neck covered by a few strands of hair, his gaze dangerous and focused. The creepy feeling came again, and Sierra shrank her neck, thinking it would be better not to understand. She said first, "It's a pity that I am only interested in being your wife, but since the Duke will never marry a poor man with an empty title, I voluntarily give up my surging love for you." It seemed that she was not the one who scolded him for being arrogant at the banquet yesterday. Sierra took off her coat and gave it back to him, then took a step back and gave sincere advice, "The women on this ship who are spying on you are not good people. There is no need for you to follow them. This finds a wife. I have a sister in Cambodia called Anashi. I think she will meet all the requirements you want to get married. She is a perfect woman. You can meet me if you have a chance." Sierra ran very fast, and looked very suffocated as she knelt on her knees in the room. As the second richest man in the kingdom after the king, this old monster who had lived for hundreds of years had created countless dirty industries underground. She suspected that he was actually richer than the king. Want to work for him? Those who worked for him were never human, and she had every reason to think that his intention was to turn her into a vampire. The reason is also very simple. Anaxi got his attention because of her special ability to block his voice. He likes to collect talented humans and transform them into vampire subordinates. There was a high probability that he could not hear Syrah's voice every time. His strange skills that sometimes blocked and sometimes failed to block him also attracted his attention. At best, as long as he doesn't provoke the heroine, she has a pretty good chance of surviving in his hands thanks to this special feature. The sea voyage has come to an end. She only needs 2 nights to reach Cambania County, away from this dangerous man and focusing on hugging the mermaid's thigh. Rosehill was left alone on the deck. The servant quietly came to him and took away the suit jacket in his hand. "Are you going to transform her?" "I can't read her heart, it's good and bad," Rosehill said calmly. Her neatly combed short blonde hair was blown away by the wind and fell on her forehead. "Exciting capabilities may be born. Don't we care about the fish in the cargo hold?" "His tribe just knocked a piece of the ship's plank off course," the servant asked again. "The ocean is not my jurisdiction. If they want to capsize the boat, throw the mermaid back into the sea." The cold voice floated in the night sky. Ever since the incident in the card room came out yesterday, wherever Syrah went, people looked at her with sympathy and pity. It turned out that yesterday, Lily covered her broken nose in an attempt to show pity in the infirmary, explaining that she was the one who was being held down and beaten. As a result, she was slapped by her old father. The story was quietly spread from the mouths of the doctors and nurses there. In any case, it is wrong both emotionally and rationally for the noble daughter of a marquis to bully the daughter of an earl who is still in mourning. This matter will directly lead to Lily being unable to get married if it becomes fermented in the circle. Please comment on the women's section. No one can afford the lottery. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Shire. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 13. Who would want a hypocritical lady with violent tendencies? Syrah, who was almost beaten and disfigured, only created a heroic image of herself. There were too many of them, and she had to fight back out of self-preservation. This led to many daughters of wealthy merchants and some nobles of the same level on the ship throwing attacks on her. An olive branch of friendship. Most of the titled nobles look down on the rich and think they are superior to others, but in Syrah's eyes, as long as they are rich, they are her good friends and connections in the future. The social life that suddenly enriched her, she accepted everything. In the morning, I was invited to listen to a quintet at a first-class luxury concert with Khalida, the daughter of the Bank of England and the President of the Bank of England. In the afternoon, I swam and drank tea with Giganti, the wife of a medical charity. Among these super-rich businessmen with no title but top-notch wealth, Sierra got an unprecedented taste of happiness and money. Money is an elusive figure for businessmen. Their enthusiasm and generosity made her almost forget that there was a mermaid waiting for her to feed in the cargo hold. After getting out of the crowd of women, Syrah hurried to the second-class dining room and asked the chef to buy some fresh seafood. "Miss, don't you need us to send a chef over to cook?" "Unnecessary." Syrah bypassed the crowd and walked from the outer railway track at the bottom. The wind and waves tonight were stronger than at any time in the previous few nights. It was raining lightly on the sea, and the cold wind was blowing against me, making me almost unsteady on my feet. The crew member guarding the cargo hold was not at the door, and the cargo door was wide open. Syrah's heart skipped a beat, and she ran in with the fish. Lawside. The girls' worried shouts passed through the layers of shelves, and the mermaid suddenly fell silent when 2 large fishing spears were inserted into his neck and tail fin. Sierra ran inside and found a lot of water on the floor. A crew member was mopping the floor hard, fearing that the seawater would soak the man's cargo box. She gasped and asked, "What are you doing?" "He's been restless since the afternoon. He wants to run out," one of the crew members replied breathlessly. He rolled up his sleeves to reveal bulging veins on his copper-colored arms. You can imagine how difficult it was to suppress the mermaid just now. "Let go," Sierra ordered. "Sierra." Logosyed stared at her intently, the mania on his face gradually subsided, and his sexy lips pursed slightly, showing a worried expression. "Is he worried? What are you worried about?" Regardless of the crew's warning, Sarah threw the fish she bought into the barrel and came to him. "I am here." She bent down and opened her arms, slowly holding his head. The rhythmic heartbeat and warm body enveloped the mermaid without hesitation. The sharp tail fin slowly retracted and settled into the water. The mermaid completely calmed down in her arms. The sharp white face was soft and the eyes were relaxed. Several crew members who retrieved the harpoon looked at the scene in disbelief. Sierra's presence is like giving a tranquilizer to a human being. "You've been taming this mermaid these past 2 days? You tamed him? Oh my God. How did you do that?" "Get out," Sierra turned to them and said. The person guarding the cargo hold finally said, "Don't let him move his tail and wet the cargo, otherwise we won't be able to afford the compensation if we sell him." When everyone was gone, Sierra took back her hand. The silver hair leaked out of her fingertips, and the unique silky feeling made her lick her fingers. She bent over and lowered her elbows to the edge of the barrel, looking level with that beautiful face. "What's wrong with you today?" Logosyed's half-lidded eyelids were raised, and his long light eyelashes revealed the lake blue eyes underneath. "Leave." The deep and beautiful voice pronounced the syllables of words accurately. "You want to leave?" Sierra looked at him and said puzzledly, "I thought we had agreed, but I couldn't let you go." Before these 3 words could be said in a hurry, Logosyed came closer to her and said with difficulty, "Sela, I leave." His tail fin bobbed up and down on the bottom of the water, and the dead seafood floating on the surface tumbled with it. "Are we leaving together?" Sierra shook her head decisively. "The cruise ship will arrive at its destination soon." "That's when?" She bit her lip and held his shoulders. "I'm trying to think of a way to put you back into the shallow sea. No matter what, he will meet Anna 11, so why not be a good person before meeting him next time?" "No." He opened his mouth, revealing a row of sharp fangs, and struggled to squeeze out a few words: "Storm, rain, heavy." "There will be a storm." Sierra realized the seriousness of the matter. Mermaids belong to the ocean and are most sensitive to sea weather. Being able to reveal such thoughts proves that it is not a simple disaster. She looked solemn. "Is it serious?" He raised his upper body from the water, leaned over and touched her forehead, and the oceanic water vapor enveloped her. "Run away, Sierra." His charming lake blue eyes almost sucked her into the whirlpool, making her agree to escape with him without hesitation. Sierra closed her eyes in time to regain her senses, and held his cold cheeks with both hands. "I can't leave, but I will find a way. Lucid, you believe me?" The mermaid hesitated for a while, then rubbed her cheek in his unique way, and then his beautiful face distanced itself from hers. "Eat first." Sarah pushed the belly-up fish in the water toward him. Lucid glanced at the fat flounder, with a clear look of disgust in his eyes. Sarah didn't notice his eyes, but watched as he easily tore the fish meat apart with his sharp canine teeth, chewed it up and swallowed it along with the milky white fish bones inside. She watched with curiosity as his throat kept rolling. Those fish bones did not put any burden on his digestive system. They seemed to be ground into powder and easily entered his stomach. It wasn't until he finished eating that Sierra stood up and said softly, "I'll come over early tomorrow morning. Can you please be quiet tonight?" She raised her index finger to her lips and made a silent gesture. In the dimly lit cargo hold, the lonely mermaid stood beside the barrel and watched her leave. After being warned by Logosyed, Sierra returned to the room and carefully took stock of what might happen next. Will the largest and most luxurious cruise ship in the Kingdom of Larini sink near Cambania County due to catastrophic weather, and the mermaid Roxette on the ship will be stranded and be picked up by an AI? Is this the plot? She tugged at her hair in annoyance, her memory being too long ago not enough to support her in recalling too much content. Assuming that the ship sinks, the vampire duke who will definitely survive will also meet Nashi in Cambania County, where the third male protagonist Eric lives deep in the jungle. In other words, from here on, the love-hate entanglement between the four people officially begins, and her life of being a cannon fodder also ends with her fate. After briefly looking over the general direction, Sierra slapped the table and made a decision. It is absolutely impossible to die in a shipwreck. She has to play the last emotional card with Lodosier to ensure that he will not forget her kindness after meeting an Asai. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 14. I don't expect to get along well with all three male protagonists, but I have to catch the one who is the most deceptive to gain enough favorability points. The waves indeed increased after nightfall, but it was not very dangerous for a cruise ship with tens of thousands of tons. The unfinished cup of water placed on the table sloshed slightly. The temperature in early spring was extremely cold under the rain. The fireplace in the bedroom is lit very high. Sierra sat on a chair and looked through the window at the dark night scene. She thought about it for a full hour, and finally made up her mind to wrap herself in a blanket, open the door, and go to the first-class cabin upstairs. It stands to reason that she would not be able to pass the exclusive staircase for the first-class cabin, but the waves were too heavy tonight and there was no one on the ship's corridor, and the midnight watchman was dozing off. Sierra walked into the first-class cabin grandly. Aldine, who came out with an empty wine glass, happened to see her wandering around like a headless fly. Thinking that she might become one of them in the future, his pale face lost the arrogance of the previous days, and his tone became much better. "Miss Sarah, this is first class." Seeing that it was the servant beside Rose Hill, Sierra quickly walked over. "I know, I'm here to find the Duke." A faint smell of blood penetrated her nose, and she saw the wine glass stained with red viscous liquid out of the corner of her eye, her face calm. "I have something urgent to tell him," she explained her purpose of coming. "There are many women who like to knock on his door late at night." Aldine deliberately raised the tray to his chest to observe her reaction. "I won't take off my clothes," Sierra promised. She would not serve herself to his table as a plate of rare steak. Click. There was the sound of unlocking and twisting in the heavy door behind him, and the wooden door covered with white paint opened. Sierra immediately turned around, her eyes blankly blank. The devil, who is as white as a plaster statue, leans against the door. His black satin robe is hung loosely on his broad shoulders. The collar of the white shirt underneath is wide open. The face created by the Creator is facing the light, and the light and dark light intersect on his face, which is deep. There was a faint cyan color under the eye sockets, and the dark red eyes were slightly narrowed, showing a cool feeling. The extremely offensive beauty reveals the danger of murder. "What do you want to tell me?" He walked out from behind the door. Water was still hanging from the ends of his hair just after taking a shower, dripping down his porcelain white neck, dyeing his white collar translucent and close to his skin. Sierra swallowed her saliva as she was shocked by the highly visual beauty, and moved her eyes away in panic. "I just want to remind you that a storm is coming and the boat may capsize." Her concern made Rose Hill's lips curl up slightly, and there was not much smile in her eyes under her eyelashes. He came to the girl, and her clear and intense heartbeat sounded in his ears. "Fresh flesh, sweet taste. 3 hours ago, you said you gave up your love for me." His voice was calm. The extremely elegant smell of roses after the rain rushed into Sierra's nose, and the faint fragrance mixed with a hint of rust stained her skin, making her fear almost overflow from her chest. "We can't back down now." She clenched her fists and mustered up the courage to raise her face to look into those dangerous eyes. It's not the same thing. Roxad told me that there will be a big storm, and the upcoming shipwreck will kill many people. I came here just in hope you go remind the captain and find a way to evacuate to a safe sea as soon as possible. It's still 2 days and 1 night's journey to the nearest dock in Kambana, said the servant Aldine. Syrah stared at those calm eyes and expressed her inner thoughts. I want to tell the captain that it was a mermaid who told me that a small storm can turn into a big disaster. This is a joke, but they will believe you. You have to go and warn the captain to get away from the storm as soon as possible. There are thousands of passengers on this ship and they cannot all die here. Rose Hill's eyes were too penetrating, and all he could read of her thoughts was to ask for help. Seeing that he was silent, Syrah became a little anxious, so she took the initiative to step forward and grab his satin robe. At least for the sake of your safety, don't put yourself in danger. Her mind was filled with frantically typing her thoughts of concern for his safety and wanting him to be safe. These words also successfully reached Rose Hill's ears, and his eyes finally showed subtle changes. A big palmful of rings was placed on the top of her hair. You like duplicity, Sierra? She bit her lip, blushed and took a step back to avoid his touch. That's all I have to say, please Duke. Aldine watched her run away and clicked his lips to reveal some of his white fangs. I was wrong. She is not afraid of you, but loves you. Rose Hill lowered his hand. He couldn't figure out her true appearance now. Such passionate voices and worries were blasted in his ears over and over again. He didn't believe much. Syrah was not sure whether this wave of favorability had been achieved. Anyway, the purpose of saving people was achieved, so she would just wait and see what happens. Shortly after she came back and lay down, in the boiler room, a rivet on the ship's plank that had been hit by the mermaid suddenly broke due to the increased water flow and pressure, and the ship's plank disintegrated. Boom! There was a muffled sound at the bottom of the ship, and the sea water instantly squeezed into the high-temperature burning boiler room. Aldine was ordered by the Duke to warn the captain. The old captain with many years of experience had already felt that something was wrong. This time, the disaster caused by the small wind and waves came quickly and quickly. As soon as he gave the order to detour, the entire ship's power engine stopped running. The person on duty in the boiler room hurriedly ran up to report, the dented ship plank cracked. Boiler room number 3 was flooded. The coal bunker in boiler room number 6 caught fire. I think all coal bunkers are now in its water. Oh damn it, the captain looked desperate. He shouted, go and wake everyone up. Go and wake everyone up quickly. It was still dark, so the servants and waiters on the ship were ordered to put on life jackets urgently. They ran in the corridors on each floor to wake up the passengers who were still sleeping. Miss Sarah, put on your life jacket and go to the second-class cabin to assemble. Her dedicated waiter hurriedly woke her up and handed her a white life jacket stuffed with cork. Extreme weather with surging waves and sub-zero temperatures will definitely freeze to death for many people. Sierra rummaged through the box and put on all the clothes she could keep warm. The aisles were filled with exclamations from delicate passengers. Ladies flocked to the window where valuables were stored to collect jewelry, blocking the stairs. Syrah had all the few remaining jewelry on her body, and she hurried to the rainy outer deck. The swaying in the cabin made her almost bump into someone while walking. Go and stand in front of the lifeboat. Ladies first. Children first. Men are not allowed to ride. The male stewards on the deck shouted loudly, and the men who had gentlemanly character engraved in their bones very consciously stepped out of the way. They were wearing life jackets. The only thing they could do on the deck was to help the ladies get on the boat. The way the ship sank is similar to that of the Titanic. The reason why the cruise ship sank is said to be because the rivets used to make the ship were of impure rigidity and poor quality, which resulted in the rivets not being hard enough to break upon impact with the iceberg. Another reason is said to be related to the fire in the coal bunker, which needs to be verified and we don't know yet. All the aristocratic lifestyles on the cruise ship in the article refer to the life patterns of the 19th century at that time. The reference data may be biased and cannot be verified carefully. Just watch the plot. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 15. The lifeboat hanging on the bracket kept hitting the ship's board with the strong wind, and the ladies might fall if they took even a slight step. Syrah followed the crowd to the deck, and a crew member immediately waved to her, "Miss Syrah, come on board." The lower deck after the third-class cabin was too close to the sea, and the wind and waves were too strong for placing lifeboats. This caused all the passengers in the second-class cabin to crowd onto the second-class deck, and the entire second-class deck was overcrowded. The place is filled with chaotic scenes and tragic farewells of life and death. "Sela, come here," Khalida, the sharp-eyed daughter of the bank president, shouted to her on the boat. Syrah was pushed to the lifeboat by Roger, whom she had met once before. He had just finished sending his mother to the first-class ship, and now he ran to the second-class deck to help. Thinking that Syrah was frightened, he bent down and prepared to carry her to the boat. He also said comfortingly, "It's okay, Miss Syrah, the lifeboat will take you away from the storm." After taking a look at the remaining dozen ships waiting for passengers, Syrah quickly avoided Roger's hand, turned around and squeezed out of the crowd. "Oh no! Syrah, where are you going? Come back quickly." Khalida pressed her hat that was about to blow off in the wind and clung to the edge of the boat, watching helplessly as her petite body disappeared into the crowd. Sarah walked backwards on the ship's corridor. The railway at the bottom was no longer possible. The royal cruise ship was sinking, and the water was spreading quickly. The boiler room was flooded, and water began to enter the laundry room. She finally ran to the cargo hold at the stern of the ship, but the guards outside had long disappeared. Lawside. Syrah rushed in, and the floor in the cargo hold was already soaked up to her calves. The mermaid in the barrel heard her call, and her face emerged from the bottom of the water. "Sierra," he revealed his wet head, his silver hair sticking to his forehead, covering most of his eyes. The cold sea water soaked through Syrah's shoes and cotton socks, and she ran to him while holding up her skirt. "Give me your hand." The thick hemp rope tightly wrapped Rashid's paws, and Syrah trembled with her fingertips to pull the knot tied to his wrist. The water-soaked hemp rope had no elasticity at all, and she couldn't pull off the knot as thick as her fist for a long time. "Damn it! Why is it so difficult to understand?" She was emotional, her milky brown glass eyes were filled with water, and she was almost overwhelmed by panic. Luxide used the fish tail as a support to stand upright in the water, his beautiful white body gently pressing against hers. "Sierra." He had no hands, but his slightly cool and slippery body enveloped her in a hugging gesture. "No, afraid." With her stumbling words and body full of moisture, Sierra gradually relaxed, and the knot tied by her fingers was untied by her. Round after round of ropes fell, and the mermaid's fisted hands gradually stretched out, similar to human webbed hands. There was a thin film at the end of the knuckles connecting the palms, and the stretched fingertips were sharp. It's hard to imagine that such a hand, which is comparable to an art knife, can't cut those ropes. Luo Syed raised his hand, his soft palm facing inward, and gently pressed it against Syrah's cheek that was so cold that it was almost stiff. "Sierra," he lowered his head, his lake blue eyes exuding a charming light, "follow me." Boom. The rivets in the cabin acted like a chain reaction, and another ship plate broke in the cargo hold. The impact of the water knocked Syrah to the ground. Luo Syed's hand brushed against her fingers, and he watched her fall into the cold sea water. His expression immediately became anxious, and he grabbed the iron chain around his neck and pulled violently. A smell of rotten wood suddenly rushed into his nostrils. His sharp and fierce eyes immediately looked at the cabin door, and a ferocious beast roar came out of his mouth. The soft dorsal fin on his back stood up like a blade. The threatened Aldine appeared on the top of one of the shelves in a few blinks. He crawled on it in the posture of a wolf dog, exposing his white canine teeth. His black and red eyes looked at the mermaid. His appearance also blocked Syrah behind him, which made Rossid's expression become more ferocious. Syrah, whose head was covered by sea water, didn't know what was happening outside. She never thought that she would fall so hard. She was wearing too many clothes, and the large amount of sea water instantly sucked her into a swollen sponge ball. I followed the life jacket and floated on it, my butt landed on the ground, and I couldn't raise my head for a while. A hand that was colder than the sea water took hold of her fluttering arm and easily pulled her out of the water. Sierra ran into a warm embrace, and her eyes, which were stimulated by the dirty water, barely opened a slit to see who was coming. Her voice trembled, Duke Rosehill. He actually came to find her. The incredible voice rang in her ears. Rosehill lowered his head, his dark eyes were cold and intense. Why come? He can't die. He is tied up. I want to untie him and let him swim away. Sierra kept shivering. Even though she knew that there was a large ice coffin in front of her that had no body temperature, she still squeezed into his arms without hesitation. Are you stupid? Are you afraid that he will drown here? Aldine quietly came down from the shelf, alert to the mermaid who broke the chain and regained his freedom. Syrah didn't refute his taunting behind her back. She rubbed her eyes, and there were a lot of irritated red bloodshot eyes in the whites of her eyes, and she looked hazily in the direction of the barrel. Luoxid's barrel turned sideways, and the pure black giant fish tail almost blended into the light lost cargo hold. He relied on his strong tail to stand up his upper body, and his height of more than 2 meters was filled with a sense of oppression. Sierra. He called her name, his back arched slightly, and his erect dorsal fins spread out like a row of hairs. A sense of danger arose spontaneously, and Syrah immediately shouted to him, Lawside. You are free now? I and the Duke have to rush out of here on an escape boat, so please leave quickly. If he doesn't leave, the situation may develop out of control. If a fight breaks out, she will die early if not all are saved. Duke, can you take me back to the deck? I should still be able to catch the last lifeboat. Syrah turned her head, her soft tone revealing caution. Rosehill had originally heard that she had not boarded the ship to find her, but he had no habit of carrying her out of here with his own hands. He cast a look at Aldine. The immature vampire servant came to Syrah, bent down and picked her up. The water pouring into the cabin quickly spread to his thighs, and Luoxied's eyes were fixed on the embarrassed girl who was picked up. Sierra, he called her in a low voice, anxiety in his voice. Hey, I'm fine, go back to your sea. Syrah waved her hand at him and said cruelly, I want to leave here by boat. If I swim with you, I will definitely freeze to death. Her face was already pale from the low temperature. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Shire. Author, Mei Goicheng. Chapter 16. Luoxied wanted her to be wary of the 2 man-eating beasts around her, but he was unable to organize a complete human language. His annoyance made his evil and beautiful face become more ferocious. After looking at Syrah for a moment, he sank into the water and swam quickly through the hole in the cabin that was constantly filled with water. She's freezing, Olding said. Rosehill said quietly, let's go. The water level rose quickly and had little impact on the 2 inhuman creatures. If it weren't for Syrah being a human who didn't know the truth, Aldine would have only needed 5 seconds to return to the second deck. Now they had to rush back through the water at the speed of an ant, which was really tiring and delayed. Syrah curled up in Aldine's arms, looked at the extremely elegant Duke walking next to him, and moved her lips, you came to me specifically. Rosehill turned his head and glanced at her. The girl was wearing a life jacket wider than her shoulders. Her long dark brown curly hair was messy on her chest, she had a pale and beautiful little face, and her creamy brown eyes were surprisingly bright. She was looking forward to his answer with all her heart, and those warm and shy voices and accelerated heartbeat kept echoing in his ears. Yes, Rosehill lowered his eyebrows and nodded his chin coldly. The only reason he came to her was that her talent interested him. Syrah didn't care about his cold attitude and was returned to the deck by Aldine. She successfully caught up with the last lifeboat. Roger was soaked and still standing beside the lifeboat. He saw Sierra again and shouted, "Come here quickly. The last boat is about to be released." Syrah got off Aldine's body. Her teeth were chattering uncontrollably. She just fell in the water, which increased the chance that she would freeze to death tonight. She crossed her arms and walked to Rosehill on stiff legs. "You won't get on the boat and walk with me, right?" The corners of his straight lips moved. "No." Syrah nodded and used her frozen fingers to untie a string of opal bracelets on her wrists. "This is for you." She stuffed the bracelet into his trousers pocket, rubbed her hands, and whispered, "It doesn't matter if you don't like me. I'm not worthy of it, but I still hope we can meet again in Kambana. You give it back to me. If you don't mind me regretting it now, I want to go to your place and get a job, hired by you personally." Sierra raised her face that was wetted by the rain and spoke in a sincere voice. The string of women's bracelets slid down the back of Rosehill's hand and into the pocket of his suit pants, sticking close to his skin. At this moment, his rotten heart seemed to beat because of the girl's sad mood. "Please survive, Duke of Rosehill." Sierra bit her lip tightly, and tears flowed from her eyes very obediently. She was almost moved by her sincere acting skills. Without waiting for an answer, Roger ran over and pulled her into the last lifeboat. A total of 30 lifeboats filled with women and children were manually lowered to the water and then moved frantically away from the core ocean storm zone. From the moment she boarded the ship, Sierra's eyes never left the giant black cruise ship with all the lights turned off. Under the black ocean that she didn't notice, a mermaid was swimming closely behind the ship, its dark tail fin creating waves in the water. Within a few minutes, Rosehill's figure became the size of a grain of rice and disappeared. Sierra's tearful eyes also closed sourly. She lowered her head, her long messy hair acting as a curtain to cover her cheeks. The worry and panic in her eyes had dissipated, leaving only calm. She breathed into her palms and huddled with the lady next to her to keep each other warm. From warning Rosehill that the boat was about to capsize to rescuing Roxt, everything was planned by her. Is she stupid? She's not stupid. However, it was hard to guess what the Duke was thinking. When she went to warn him of the danger, she didn't expect him to reciprocate, but it turned out that she was lucky and won the bet. "I'm sure that bracelet will leave a deep impression on him." Aldine looked at his master, holding a string of women's bracelets, standing on the deck as a statue looking in the direction of Syrah's departure. "The fish chased her," he said. "That Miss Sarah won't die." Rosehill lowered his eyes. The bracelet in his palm seemed to still retain the girl's remaining body temperature. He tightened his fingers and put it into his pocket. Gone. Of course he wouldn't die in a small shipwreck. He didn't need to breathe and didn't feel body temperature. He was just afraid that his skin would rot after being submerged in the water for a long time. After all the lifeboats had left a certain distance, the heavy rain accompanied by strong winds, and the damage to the hull began to cause extensive cracks, causing the luxurious royal cruise ship to split into two in the rough waves and sink miserably. The smart gentlemen who knew how to save themselves followed Rosehill's example and found a big wooden board to float in the ocean before the ship sank completely. The thunderstorm formed in the sky, and waves several feet high hit one after another. Most of the gentlemen could not last more than a few minutes before they were swept to death by the huge waves. The scope of the violent storm cannot be avoided immediately by just hiding. The escape boats were inevitably affected. Sitting in the middle of the swaying boat, Sarah experienced firsthand what the power of nature is. The lights on the boat have burned out, and the sky is completely black. You can't find any light at all in such an environment. There was only the loud sound of wild wolves hitting the sea, and occasionally a thunder struck behind them, which lit up the screen of light, allowing people to see what was going on around them. The cries of children and the terrified screams of women heightened the atmosphere of the disaster to the extreme. After a muffled sound of tens of thousands of iron balls hitting the ground, lightning flashes of blue-violet light split the black curtain. The moment the light came on, Sarah turned her head and her eyes widened in shock. Waves that were tens of meters high were rushing towards them silently. The haze of death shrouded her heart, and she shouted with a changed voice, "Row the boat quickly! Row the boat quickly!" At their current speed, there is a 100% chance of being caught up by the waves. Lashid, who had been following the lifeboat, swam past Sarah with his tail fins swinging at the moment Sarah was knocked into the water by the waves. The suffocating water spread over her head, depriving her of all light and oxygen. The biting sea water and whirlpool surrounded her, and the helpless Sarah inexplicably recalled the snowy nights on the streets of London when she was a child. The temperature was so cold on Christmas Day. She didn't have enough cotton-padded clothes to keep out the cold. The only piece of birthday cake she had in her hand was snatched away and eaten by people from the orphanage. Death was the thing she thought about most at that time, but she still survived. Her parents who irresponsibly abandoned her made her grow up tenaciously like a cockroach. Her thoughts gradually drifted away due to lack of oxygen, and a hand held her waist. The pale and tightly closed lips were pushed open by the smooth, Chang snake, and fresh oxygen flowed into Sarah's lips. Some typos are intentional. Hey. Please remember to vote and comment, otherwise you will not be included in the book coin drawing event. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Shire. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 17. The lungs that were about to be torn were suddenly filled with oxygen, and Sierra's calm body trembled violently. Her survival instinct forced her to open her lips, like a hungry and unsatisfied little beast that kept robbing the other person's mouth of oxygen. Her eager offensive made Luoxied half squint his eyes, and his fingers hugged her tighter. His strong tail swung quickly, leading the person out of the water rolling over the waves. Sarah didn't notice at all when air entered her nasal cavity. Her brain that stopped thinking only knew how to entangle Roxid tightly and rob the oxygen he gave her. Her kiss made him unable to control himself. The fish's tail under the water was close to the girl's delicate body, and its side fins rubbed against her calf. Sarah, who was unconscious due to the cold sea water, didn't react at all. Her hands on the mermaid's shoulders slowly fell down, and her whole body was softly pressed against his chest. Only her lips were still greedy for the warmth in her mouth. Luxid noticed that Sarah's body temperature was accelerating, and his blurred eyes quickly sobered up. He grabbed the back of her neck with his hand and forcibly tore her off her mouth. Sierra, he lifted her up and put his forehead against hers. Well. The oxygen she continuously inhaled in her mouth suddenly became cold and stinging her throat. Sarah frowned and raised her heavy eyelashes. Her vision swayed along with the ups and downs of the waves, and what came into her pupils was Rox's charming and beautiful face. She blinked hard, trying to make her blurred vision clearer. La sighed. She curled up like a weak lamb in the arms of a ferocious ocean beast, her body soaked in sea water kept trembling, it's so cold. Luxid's hands passed under her knees, lifted her up and hid her deeply in his arms, her thick layers of skirt spread around him, like a spread of kelp. Sarah is hypothermic rapidly, and if she is not brought ashore quickly, she will soon freeze to death in the ocean. Without saying a word, Lucid swung his fishtail and swam towards the nearest beach. There were many ladies struggling after falling from the boat in the sea. As Sierra was floating in the water, she vaguely heard a few desperate low-pitched screams, but these sounds soon left her. With its huge tail fin, the speed of Loshid's tail fin in the ocean is comparable to that of a motor-driven fishing boat, which is incredibly fast. He led Sierra down quickly, and oxygen and the special liquid with healing effects also entered her mouth with the kiss, helping to maintain her vital signs. Rose Hill stood firmly on a broken board. The heavy rain and waves soaked his suit. His eyes were looking forward in trance, and the rain kept dripping down his chin. Aldine, who was acting as an oar under the board, was swimming hard to propel himself. They encountered several frozen corpses floating on the water, including Betty, who was staring with her eyes turned up, and Lily and her red-haired friend who were still breathing. "Help, help me." Lily, who still had wet gauze wrapped around her nose, spotted them through lightning. She raised her hand with difficulty and waved, looking expectantly at the cold Duke standing on the wooden board. Hearing her cry for help, the black-haired young man turned sideways and looked over. Then he turned his feet on the board, squatted down with his straight legs in her direction, and stretched out his leather-gloved hands in front of her. "Duke." Lily's eyes suddenly burst into brilliant light. She tried hard to move towards that hand, and she tried hard to reach for the big palm. But the moment she was about to come into contact with him, before Lily could see anything clearly, her head was violently pulled to the side by the big hand trying to pull her, revealing a large piece of white neck. The sharp fangs were accurately inserted into her carotid artery. Lily's scream was stuck in her throat, and her eyes widened in shock. "Lily!" The sea suddenly became quiet. The red-haired girl who was traveling with her couldn't see clearly what was going on in front of her, so she hurriedly shouted, "Hurry up and pull me up too." What responded to her was a thunder, and the thunder light illuminated Lily's face with her neck broken and blood splattered on her face in horror. "Ah!" the red-haired girl screamed. Aldine, who swam up behind her silently, covered her mouth and then bit her artery with his fangs. After enjoying the late dinner, Rose Hill slowly stood up, the blood leaking from his lips was swept away by the tip of his tongue, and his scarlet eyes were shining in the lightless ocean. The fresh food this time was enough to keep them full for a week. Loseed arrived at the nearest beach as quickly as possible, located on the outskirts of Kambuna County. Dark forest. From the moment he stepped into the unfamiliar territory, the warning roars of the wolves sounded from the depths of the jungle. Their keen noses had long captured the beasts swimming towards the shallows. After invading the werewolf's territory, Loseed had to stop his movements. He poked half of his face out of the water and looked up at the height of the cliff with his lake blue eyes. A black shadow jumped down from the top and swam towards him nimbly. At the same moment, a gray and white horse-sized wolf rushed to the beach, growling quickly, "Eric! Come back here! That's the mermaid from Saki Island! Danger!" Several other older and stronger wolves stepped into the water and quickly surrounded Loseed. The young and energetic boy swam up to the mermaid, his muscles tensed up. "You have intruded into our territory, friend." Roxid looked down at the girl in his arms, knowing that if he further invaded the wolf pack's territory, he would be torn apart by them. He was too confused to face multiple strong werewolves at the same time, and this was the closest place where he could land. In order for Sierra to live, he must give her to them. Roxid exposed half of his body and raised the unconscious Serato a little higher. "Sarah! Help!" Eric's eyes changed. "You brought a human with you." Locke pursed his lips tightly, carefully released his hand, and pushed Sierra's body towards the werewolf in front. With the vigilance of his companions, Eric quickly picked up Sierra and carried her into his arms. He felt as if he was holding a piece of ice. If the heartbeat hadn't been beating weakly, he would have thought it was a corpse. Sierra also felt like she had been transferred from the foot of an iceberg to the crater of a volcano. The sudden warmth clung to her side, making her unable to help but dive in. "You want us to save her?" Eric asked. Loseed nodded. He had no intention of attacking and allowed the wolves to gradually relax. They won't start a war if they can avoid it. Fanny stood on the shore and roared a few times, and Eric said to Loseed, We will save her. It wasn't until he saw Sira being carried ashore and entering the jungle that Logosied slowly turned his gaze away, swinging his tail fin, away from the territory of this group of werewolves. Fanny, who turned back into a human, put on her clothes and punched Eric's thick shoulder. Don't be so impulsive in the future. Eric. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Goicheng. Chapter 19. Eric walked over and kicked him on the butt. Envy me. Jem just smiled at Sierra and said, if you are still cold tonight, you can come to me. Sierra responded obediently, okay. After another round of banter, several gentle-looking women brought the tableware. Okay, stop making trouble and come and eat. Except for Jem, Fanny, and Eric, there were several muscular men with naked upper bodies and bronzed skin. They were all standing next to a beautiful or ordinary woman. Sira remembered that the wolf tribe had a very beautiful setting. A wolf would only mark one woman as its only partner for life. They might give up immortality because the other woman was a human. If their partner unfortunately died, they would usually choose to commit suicide or commit suicide. This reminded her of a novel she loved to read when she was a minor in London, City of XX. The werewolf in it was one of the top companion images in her mind at the time. Who doesn't like a warm, oversized wolf dog? She walked into their public dining room, which was a bit like a rainforest dining bar. It was a long table made of an oversized piece of wood. It was coated with a layer of wax to ensure that the tabletop was smooth. It was open on all sides, with only a few thick wooden pillars standing on it. On the four corners, people from one ethnic group sat down one after another. Sierra looked at the empty seat next to Eric and walked over to sit down. We don't have sterling silver spoons or silver-plated spoons, only the cheapest ceramics. Fanny handed the tableware to her. I don't mind, thank you. Sierra thanked her. Her good temper made the other party look at her twice. Breakfast was simple: cheap coffee, toast with mayonnaise, and a basket of hard-boiled eggs. Fanny brought her a piece of toast smeared with mayonnaise. Where did the sightseeing boat carrying you sink? How many other people fell into the sea? Sierra took the bread, feeling sad as she recalled the disaster last night. I don't know, maybe tens of kilometers away from here, there are probably thousands of people who died. Extreme climate, low temperature, waves, heavy rain, drowning, any one of them can kill someone. Thousands of people. The people sitting around eating together sighed. Jem guessed, it can't be the Royal Cruise ship, right? That big luxury ship from Leicester. Only that ship could reach such a large scale. Yes, that's the ship. Sierra nodded. Unsurprisingly, this would definitely cause a nationwide sensation. I rescued that mermaid from the crew. He was going to be killed, but he saved me when the boat capsized. Speaking of Logosied, her eyes were soft. He is a good man. Good man, Ha. Sitting at the other end of the table, he looked at the slightly older man named Gale. He was full of exaggeration. Maybe it was his tale that capsized the ship. Sierra frowned. No, he has been by my side all the time. It was caused by the sudden storm. Okay girl. Fanny swallowed the bread and said to her, you are in the largest uninhabited forest in Cambania County. We are the only residents. I will go to the town to buy some sugar later. You can send a letter to your family and ask them to take you back. Sierra's eyes lit up, then dimmed. I don't know where my father's home is, I've never been here. Eric turned sideways and looked at her. I don't know. What do you mean? Who is your father? Sierra pursed her lips with a sad expression. My father is Earl Lizzie. Does he also live in the town? If the distance is close, I can walk back. Not just Eric, everyone was surprised. Count Lizzie has a daughter besides Anasi. Jem immediately looked at the stunned Eric, slapped the table and said excitedly, I said she was very similar to Anasi, but Eric said no. Sierra held back the tears that were about to burst out and said, "It's not like that." Eric said at the same time, "It's not like that." The two of them turned to look at each other at the same time, and the atmosphere suddenly became quiet. "I'm full, please take it easy." Sierra stood up with her head lowered, wrapped herself in a blanket and ran out of the restaurant. The beautiful woman Germany slapped Jem on the head. "You may not know it when you are young, but Earl Lizzie's real wife left Cambania County a long time ago." Jem covered his head. "Why? Why else? The current Mrs. Josie is a mistress. She was so angry that the Countess gave birth to an Ashi. Many people know the gossip." Eric pushed away the wooden stool and stood up. "I'll go take a look." Their house was built near the cliff. Following the sea breeze, Sierra only ran for 5 or 6 minutes before climbing up a large boulder barefoot, with the cliff below. The temperature was still very low in the cedar forest where the sun was shining, and the sea breeze blew over her face, freezing every pore on her body. The ocean, with white waves rolling up below, was calm. La sighed, "Are you still here?" She wrapped herself in a blanket and squatted down silently, looking at the sea with tears falling unsatisfactorily. There was the sound of small branches being trampled off behind her, and Sierra immediately wiped away her tears with the back of her hand and turned back with red eyes. Eric strode over, holding her lost slippers in his hand. "What are you doing here?" Sierra sniffed. "Your merman has left." Eric stepped on the stone and sat down cross-legged next to her. Sierra turned her face away and didn't want to pay attention to him. Eric put the slippers next to her mossy and muddy feet. "Don't take Jem's words to heart." Sierra was silent for a while, her fingers clenching the gray blanket on her body. "My mother died of tuberculosis. If Lizzie hadn't wanted me to come back to restore his reputation, I wouldn't have come back at all." She raised her face and looked at the heroic Eric. "I'm not a rich lady like Anna. I'm a pauper." She was obviously a real lady, but she became a pauper because of her mistress. In essence, there is no difference from this group of werewolves living in the deep forest, right? Everyone is equally poor. Eric didn't know how to answer her. He touched his short black hair that was close to his scalp. "I don't think you are similar to Anna 11. You have no similarity at all." Sierra stared at him and sniffed. "How do you know? Have you seen her?" "I am their hunter and I often see her. After Robinson retired, I have been providing game to their family." Eric bumped her arm with his jacket-covered arm. "Maybe there will be a hare on your dining table in the future. Or if I hunt the venison, your future servant will still pay me, and you will always be richer than me." Sierra was amused by him, and her milky brown eyes filled with water vapor smiled, making her bright facial features lively. Eric was slightly startled and looked away unnaturally. "Eric," she stretched out her white hands towards him and said in a soft tone, "My name is Sierra, shall we be friends?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shore. Author, Mei Goicheng. Chapter 20. Eric immediately pretended to be a gentleman, took the back of her hand and kissed her. "You are the second nobleman who is willing to make friends with me, Miss Sierra." "Who's the first one?" Sierra asked. Anna 11. He did not avoid it, and a gentle look flashed across his raised face. "Your family relationship is very complicated, but she is a nice person, and you will be well taken care of." "I hope so." Sierra sat for a while longer, then stood up and planned to jump off the boulder. Eric took her arm and reminded, "Put on your shoes." She looked down at her feet covered with moss and mud, then bent down to pick up the slippers. "I'll go back and wash my feet before putting them on." Eric glanced at her small white feet, jumped off the stone first and bent down in front of her. "Come up." Sierra didn't hesitate at all. As soon as he finished speaking, she held her shoes and jumped on his generous back. Eric hugged her thighs, lifted the weightless person up, turned his face and said, "You are really not polite at all." Sierra's chin rested on his left shoulder, she turned her face and said thank you, her lips just brushed the corner of Eric's turned lips, and both of them stared at each other in shock. She suddenly raised her upper body on his back, her fingers pressed on the thick shoulders, her face turned red. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Eric coughed unnaturally, "It doesn't matter, it's just a friendly kiss." Sierra's hand squeezing his shoulder suddenly tightened, and her round nails dug into the thick triangular muscles. "Do you often kiss other women like this in a friendly way?" She sounded unhappy, and her eyes with hidden meaning fell on Eric's slightly red ears. Eric turned his head sideways, his angular jaw tightening. "No, don't talk nonsense." Oh, Sierra's unhappy attitude immediately improved a bit. She lay on his back again and whispered, "This is my first time too." Eric's ears turned redder, and he ran with her on his back and never spoke to her again. Sierra also stopped teasing him. What she is sure of now is that Eric is the hunter of Anais' family. The two have known each other since childhood, but the heroine has not launched an emotional offensive against him. The specific reason is unknown, but it is certain that Eric has a crush on Anashi. So what is it that prevents Anashi from further developing towards him, giving her the opportunity to take advantage of him? She had almost forgotten all the plot in the book, and Sierra had no clue after thinking about it for a long time. Jem saw them running back from the woods, carrying a shotgun and shouting, "Eric, we're going hunting." "Right away." Eric placed Sierra on the edge of a well, scooped some water with a wooden ladle and poured it on her dirty feet. The coldness of the well water made her tremble all over. She curled up her toes and took a deep breath. "You are going hunting now?" "Can I go?" Gale, who was passing by, heard her words and immediately objected, "The jungle here is not your noble's private hunting ground. Stay here peacefully." Eric agreed with what he said. He found a towel for Sierra and threw it on her knees. Fanny went down the mountain. "I think Earl Lizzie's car will come to pick you up tomorrow at the latest. You can't another accident." "Okay then, I'll wait here for you to come back safely." Sierra nodded, her face cued. Integrating into the wolf clan should not be rushed. The establishment of emotional bonds must be done step by step. She has the patience. Before leaving, Eric pointed in the direction of the restaurant. "When we get to lunch, we'll go find Germany." "New." Seeing his back disappeared as several naked muscular men rushed into the bushes, Sierra wiped her feet and put on slippers, wandering around the camp. In the open space behind a wooden house, a rope was tied between two cedar trees, and a woman with two braids was hanging out the skirt she had changed. She also washed her clothes, and Sierra walked over and said gratefully, "How can I help?" Gamani turned around and glanced at her without hope. "Hanging clothes." "Good." Sierra agreed readily, put aside the blanket on her body, rolled up her sleeves and bent down to pick up a pair of men's trousers and hang them on the clothesline. Her deft movements surprised Germany. "Can you still work?" Knowing that the question was a bit abrupt, Germany quickly shut up. Sierra winked at her. "I have all four limbs, so of course I can work." Most people's stereotype of female nobles is to take care of the family and conduct various social interactions. Although it sounds nice, these care and social interactions are all maintained by servants. The ladies usually only move their mouths and dance. And this so-called aristocratic life has many middle-class people or wealthy businessmen vying to spend money to imitate it. "Compared to your noble sister, you look better." Germany spoke much better to her. Sierra pursed her lips and smiled. "I haven't officially met her yet, but Eric said she is a nice person, and I believe in his vision." "Eric," Gamani curled her lips, unfolded a men's shirt in her hand and shook it vigorously, "he is just an idiot. People in the town say he wants to eat swan meat." Sierra suppressed her smile. "He likes Anna 11. He went to Earl Lizzie's manor every now and then to deliver wild game. He chatted with the lady across the fence and was driven away so many times. Sierra lost her smile completely. Is that so? No, he is just a big idiot. Gamani continued to scold him. Sierra hung the clothes on the clothesline, patted them with her hands and tidied them up. She turned her head and said softly, if Anaxi also likes Eric, she won't just talk to him across the fence. She cares about her identity being with a hunter and being gossiped about. After listening to what she said, Germany felt as if she had found a like-minded friend. She came over and hooked her shoulder. It's just that he just doesn't understand the truth that even you understand. She probably figured out how to distinguish herself from Anna 11. Sierra smiled softly and said something that was full of tea, but Eric and I have become friends. Anaxi is my nominal sister, and I respect their respective choices. At dusk, Eric and his tribe returned. They hunted several deer, a bear, and several live, fluffy hares. Sierra and Germany were huddled in the kitchen and chatting animatedly with several women. It was Eric who walked into the restaurant holding 2 rabbit ears with one hand and kicked the door to call the attention of several women. Rabbit, Sierra's eyes lit up, she ran to him and stretched out her hand to touch the hare's soft body. Eric subconsciously thought that she liked furry and cute little animals as much as Anna 11, so he took one out of his hand and put it in her arms. Here you go. Can I eat the spicy rabbit head? Sierra held up the rabbit in her hand and looked at him with bright eyes. The heroine Neptune is at full level square root. This is really a story about fish farming. If you are feeling unwell, please quit as soon as possible. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 21. Eric's expression froze for a moment. Rabbit head. Sierra asked curiously, do you eat rabbits but not the heads? Eat, of course, I can make spicy rabbit heads for you. Gamani suppressed a smile and stepped forward to take away all the rabbits, including the one in her arms. Sierra clapped her hands and saw Eric staring at her with a strange look, so she couldn't help but ask, what's wrong? Can't I eat the rabbit you gave me? No, I thought you would want to raise that rabbit, Eric said unnaturally, his dark brown eyes flashing. Girls like this kind of furry things. She wouldn't be happy if someone else's interests and hobbies were put on her head. Sierra was stunned for 2 seconds and then smiled. I don't like cute creatures, especially rabbits. She stretched out her hand to hold one of his little fingers, tilted her head halfway, and said in a soft voice, of course, if you put it on the dining table and bring it in front of me, I'll be happy to share it with you, good friend. She was always charming and beautiful when she smiled, and her dazzling brown eyes made Eric unable to look away for a moment. There are no electric lights in the forest. All lighting tools are gas lamps or candles. Under the warm honey-colored light, the girl's slightly raised lips are plump and moist. Eric somehow reminds him of a casual kiss in the forest, like gummy candy. The touch, the sweet temptation. Eric? Are you listening? Sierra shook his hand. Eric lowered his eyes, his eyelashes casting a light shadow on his eyelids, covering up the restless emotions under his eyes. I understand, you like to eat rabbits. What about you? You don't like eating rabbits? Sierra continued to shake him. He glanced at her and responded softly, I like it. Unlike his elders who had already transformed into adults, he could not tear the fresh prey directly with his mouth, but he longed for that feeling, and he longed to become a real king of the jungle and hunt in his own territory. After getting the answer she wanted, Sierra let go of him, smiled and said, if you have a chance, will you teach me how to hunt? Okay, Eric nodded in agreement. Satisfied, Sierra returned to the kitchen. She was good at helping iron rabbits, and her behavior once again shocked several women who were accustomed to farm work. You are really a poor lady, you can even do this. Gamani's sigh came from the kitchen. Eric sat in the dining room, listening to the conversation inside, and looking in the direction of the kitchen in trance. Sierra, who has been used to seeing people's looks since she was a child, knew why Eric wanted to give her the rabbit. He thought she had the same interests as Anaxi. Love animals like rabbits. There is nothing wrong with pretending to like him, but in front of a wolf, the best way she can do is to inspire his commonality. Sierra only stayed here for one day, and with her kind and unpretentious temper, she successfully captured the favor of all women. When Fanny came back during dinner, she saw her squeezed between her two companions, with two large rabbit heads wrapped in chili peppers placed in a ceramic bowl. Earl Lizzie has received the news. Your sister will come by car to pick you up at the foot of the mountain tomorrow. Sierra nodded, her mouth turned red from the spicy food, and her eyes filled with tears while she was still gnawing hard on the rabbit meat. Seeing her pitiful look, Eric stood up and poured her a glass of water. Don't eat too much, your stomach won't be able to bear it. Oh, Sierra nodded obediently and stopped chewing the remaining half. Jem watched the interaction between the two and interjected, it's only been a day and you are already in trouble? Sierra, don't be deceived by Eric. He has broken the hearts of many little girls in town. Sierra raised her face from the cup, sniffed and explained, we are just friends. Oh, then you are Eric's second noble friend, Jem said meaningfully, they are still two sisters. These words are hard not to remind people that Eric wants to be in two boats. Sierra didn't care about this. The young and energetic Eric got up and rushed towards Jem. Jem ran away with a piece of meat in his mouth, but was soon caught up by the strong Eric, and the two had a rough fight in the open space outside the restaurant. Won't something happen to them? Sierra was a little worried. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Gail's attitude towards her has also improved significantly, probably because he knew that she was helping at the camp in the afternoon. After dinner, several women went to wash dishes. Sierra was sitting on a wooden bench in the open space outside, watching the stars. As soon as she saw Germany bringing a piece of fresh food into the house alone, she heard a thump in her ears. She immediately turned her head and found that Gale was kneeling on the ground with one hand covering his chest. His peaceful face turned ferocious in the blink of an eye, and he made a gurgling sound in his throat. If he hadn't stood up slowly by himself, Sierra would have thought that he would have transformed in front of her. What's wrong with you? She asked aloud. Boom. In other wooden houses and in the jungle, all the werewolves who had just dispersed ran back and gathered around Gale. They're back. The taste is very close. Several people whispered to each other, and Eric walked over to Sierra with a serious face and said, go to my room to rest early. But do you still want to go out after it's very late? Sierra stood up and asked puzzledly, what happened? Eric didn't answer directly, but took her hand and led her into the bedroom. He pressed Sierra on his bed and warned, there are many wolves in the jungle, don't run around, just go to bed early here. Shortly after Eric left, Sierra heard a series of echoing wolf howls in the surrounding jungle. After a moment's thought, she understood what was making them so nervous. Rosehill must have arrived in Cambodia with his servants. Sierra lay back on the bed, raised her hands, and the bell-mouthed sleeve slid down her slender arms, leaving nothing at her wrists. She didn't know if he would return the bracelet to her. Probably yes. The northern port of Wally is brightly lit late at night. A large number of recovered bodies were neatly placed on the pier covered with white cloths, waiting to be transported. One of the survivors rescued by the lifeboat, the Duke of Rosehill, was surrounded by countless reporters as soon as he landed at the port. He ignored their requests for photos and interviews, holding a string of women's bracelets in his palm, twirling the green opal on them from time to time with his fingertips, and went straight into a classic car. The car entered the neighborhood, and the werewolves who came down from the mountain stood upright on the roofs of various houses under the moonlight, observing this uninvited guest. Aldine glanced out the window and said in disgust, I can smell their stink from all the way away. Rosehill had no expression, and glanced flatly at the figure jumping on the roof under the moonlight, our new neighbor. Gale frowned and said, it's Rosehill. His tribe should live in the capital.